Who's the dumbest person you've ever met, and what story perfectly sums up their stupidity? Story 1. One night during high school, my friend and I got invited to a party. I didn't drive back then, so my friend picked me up. All went well on our way to the party. On the way back, however, he got pulled over. As we were pulling to the side of the road, I told him that I was going to pretend to be sleeping, since I was a passenger. Anyway, I hear the cop get out of his cop car, walk towards our car, and stop at the window, but doesn't say anything. I can feel the brightness of his flashlight, but I don't hear him or my friend say anything. After about what seemed like an eternity, I decided to open my eyes to see what was going on. That's when I see my friend, the guy who's driving, pretending like he's sleeping too. Story 2. I was lifeguarding at a frat party. My lifeguard friends all told me not to lifeguard for this frat, but I had my certifications freshly renewed, and they were paying really well, so I took on the challenge. I would not recommend it. There was a very drunk guy who offered me a drink when I was standing. I said no, I was guarding the water. Afterward, this same guy gets a full beer, not even open, bashes it against his head and screams, "Woo!" He's bleeding from his head now and recognizes it, is shocked for a second, and then it hypes him up even more. He then dives headfirst into the dirty 6-foot pool filled with people. Now this water was shallow. He literally could have paralyzed himself. I blow a whistle just as everything is doing, and when he gets out, he can't understand why I'm frustrated and tries to flirt with me. Mid-sentence, he recognizes he lost his Ray-Bans, stupid expensive shades, in the murky water and asks me to drain the pool. This dude was such an idiot and acted stupidly the entire 3 hours while his even more stupid friends hyped him up. Story 3. I worked once with a man named Roy. Roy had theories about how to live life, Roy-conomics. One day, he turned to me and the other member of the crew. "You boys want to know how you get nice things?" he asked. "You go to the store and you finance everything, new furniture, new appliances, television, stereos, everything. Then you don't make any payments and you don't show up for your court date. They'll end up garnishing your wages, but they take way less than the payments would have been. And then about a week later, you boys want to know how you buy a house? You apply for every credit card you can possibly get. You take out your entire balance in cash from all of them, and then you use that for your down payment. Then you don't make any payments and you don't show up for your court date." For people thinking that they may know this specific Roy, I last saw him 10 years ago, and at that time he was in his early 50s, was rocking a gray, blonde skullet, and lived in a hamlet in the province of Saskatchewan. Story 4. My friend's sister was 20 and pregnant, and she said something about how upset she was that her lady parts would be ruined. I jokingly said, "Maybe you'll come out your butt instead." She said, "What do you mean? Can they come out there too?" I thought she was joking, so I just said, "Duh, it's a 50-50 shot." She thought I was serious and asked her doctor if he could tell if the baby was going to come out of her lady parts or bum. I know technically you can tear from your lady parts to your bum in labor, meaning since it kind of becomes one hole, the baby would come out of the vagina ass, but she didn't think this. She thought she would the baby out. Should also mention there's a 30% chance it may be her first cousin's baby. She told me they only made out, but her friend let it slip that they'd been banging. Story 5. The first time I met Ben was in Improv 101. I was only taking the class for fun, but about half the people there were aspiring actors, including Ben. On the first day, the teacher had us all play this silly game to break the ice so we'd all remember each other's names. The rules were pretty simple. Number 1, pick an adjective that starts with the same letter as your first name. 2, introduce yourself using adjective plus first name. And 3, do a simple gesture that goes with it. So everyone is going around the circle introducing themselves as Daring Daniel and Lonely Lauren and Awesome Alex until we get to Ben. Ben introduces himself as Surfer Ben. He proceeded to misunderstand at least one key element of every game or exercise for the rest of the class. I have no clue how this man functions in daily life. He has since managed to get a few featured extra roles on TV, though. Story 6. Back in my younger and crankier days, I worked with a young woman who was hands down the dumbest person I've ever met. Her highlights include winning a basket auction that included a copy of the Beach Boys album Pet Sounds and complaining because she didn't want to hear a lot of mooing. And then one day, she was driving me up a wall. I convinced her to wait to open her bottle of Coke because the bottle said there was a winner every 5 minutes. She was disappointed she didn't win after waiting exactly 5 minutes. I, however, enjoyed her sulky silence for the rest of the day. Now, the best, worst one involved her chatting with a manager who was African American. She's white. They were discussing their shared, slightly uncommon name and then realized their families both came from South Carolina. She thought for a few minutes and then excitedly exclaimed, "I bet my family owned yours." She was so proud of herself for figuring out that historic connection. The manager didn't say a word and just walked away. Story 7. My brother. He's genuinely the stupidest person I know. He has broken his arms 5 times, 3 for the right arm and 2 for the left, and this is how he did it. At first, at the age of 7, dancing on a table, fell off. Also, at the age of 15, smoking pot with a friend, a cop shows up and he runs, jumps a fence, shorts get caught, and he falls out of them onto his arm. At the age of 17, runs in front of his friend's truck as it went down the road at around 30 miles per hour. Then, while at the age of 19, was trying to hide from someone and jumped over a couch and somehow broke his arm. I don't remember how he broke it the other time, I just know it's been 5 times. And then he was also arrested for possession of a firearm when he is not legally allowed to own one. It was his friend's firearm, and he pointed it at a cop. He got expelled from my high school twice. He had 2 lines in a mandatory play. He still messed it up. And then while in prison, he got a marijuana leaf tattooed on his face. Upon seeing him for the first time after prison, he said, "Mom thinks I'm getting it removed, but I'm only going to make it better. I'm also going to get Chinese lettering down my face. We are painfully white." He dropped out of high school before finishing the 10th grade, not because he had to, but just because he didn't like school and wanted to do drugs instead. He ended with a 3 in history and a 6 in math. I don't know what his other grades were. When he was 15, my uncle was 30. It took half an hour to explain to him why he would not always be half of my uncle's age. He genuinely believed that the Ebola scare a couple of years ago was the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. Story 8. I'm sure if I thought really hard, I could come up with someone more stupid, but this story is pretty good. There was this one receptionist at the vet's office we have taken our dogs to over the years who argued with my dad about how to pronounce his own name. He went in to pick up some prescriptions for our dog Daisy, and this girl asked the typical name of the dog, name of the owner type questions. "We have it listed as Michelle, and you don't look like a Michelle," she says. Dad asked how it was spelled on the monitor, and sure enough, it was still spelled Michael, Dad's name. He said, "That says Michael, that's my name." And she argued with him about it. He had to get his driver's license out to show her, and even though she finally relented to let him pick up whatever it was he was down there to pick up, she was adamant my dad had been mispronouncing his own name for 50 plus years. The best part is Dad tells us this whole story and we think nothing of it till like 3 months later when Mom took the dog in for a checkup. The girls still thought the owner of the dog was Michelle and that my mom must be in a lesbian relationship. Mom gently corrected the lady that it was Michael, and again this girl was adamant it was pronounced Michelle. Mom, bemused, said something along the lines of, "It's literally a name from the Bible. It's pronounced Michael and has been for thousands of years." The receptionist sat in silence outside of the minimal amount of talking needed for the rest of that visit. Story 9. My ex-husband. We were playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who had to go change the baby. Best 2 of 3. In round 1, I throw scissors and he throws a rock. "I win," he proclaimed. In round 2, I throw paper and he throws a rock. "I win," he says again. Paper beats rock," I tell him. His response? "No, rock beats everything." I spent like 5 minutes trying to wrap my mind around this. Finally, I ask him, "Then what's the point of even playing?" In total sincerity, he says, "To have fun." Sadly, he was not trolling me. He was completely serious. I know, it's hard to believe, but in all fairness, he was born and raised in Florida, so I changed the baby. I did pretty much everything involving the baby after that. As for my level of intelligence and that of my son, I think he said it best himself when, at 4 years old, he said to me, "Daddy can't help it. What's your excuse?" Story 10. I once called an Uber driver. When he arrived, he immediately asked me, "Are you going to Central Park?" I said, "No." He responded, "Great, because I'm not going to take you to Central Park." "Fine," I said. And then the journey gets underway, and I'm curious as to what he would have done if I said that, yes, I wanted to go to Central Park. So I asked him, "Hey, what would you have done if I said that I did want to go to Central Park?" He responded, "Look, man, I'm not going to take you to Central Park, okay? I told you already." I was a bit befuddled, but I tried again. No, I don't want to go there. In fact, you already know where I want to go. It's on your destination map. I'm just curious." What if I did want to go to Central Park? Would you have refused me the trip? Would you have driven off? He said, Look, man, I can't change the trip now, and anyway, I told you I refused to go to Central Park. You gotta understand, I'm busy. We spent nearly 15 minutes with variations of this back and forth. He was a fluent English speaker, by the way, but by the end of it, I was 100% convinced that he couldn't understand the syntax of a hypothetical. He literally couldn't understand the question, if X situation, which is not the case, then what action would you take? I wasn't even mad, just astonished. How had he managed to navigate through life thus far? What were his financial decisions like? I really wanted to follow him home and make a reality TV show about him or something. Story 11. There was this guy at my high school that wasn't too bright, was mostly harmless, but about halfway through decided he was going to be a thug. One day, he goes into a class of first years when their teacher wasn't there and robs all their electronics, cash, and valuables at knife point. Without covering his face before he left, gave them his real name, saying, And you better not tell them it was me, Jim Conrad, that stole all your stuff. He then proceeded to leave the school grounds with all the stolen stuff, but decides against stashing it off campus, and so came back with all the stolen stuff in his backpack and went to spy on the class with his backpack full of loot, while police officers were there taking statements to make sure they weren't ratting him out. Now, for those of us that want the end of the story, but it's too buried to find, the kids all rat him out, and when he hears his name, he steps into the class proclaiming he'd gut them if they didn't take back saying he did it, with the officers still in the class and all his loot on his back. He was expelled and arrested, and when word got out to our year group, everyone just face-palmed. I don't know why he's so stupid, but it wasn't an isolated act of idiocy. It was quite well known by everyone in my year group how dumb he was. He didn't even qualify for admission, but his family called in a ton of favors to get him in on recommendation. Story 12. I helped a client out to his car with some merchandise. He struggled for a bit to get into the vehicle. I jokingly asked if it was his car. He backed up, looked at it, and said, Nope, this is not my car, and went to a different color and make of car in the lot. There were only 3 cars in the whole lot. He was not elderly or had any obvious deficiencies. Not to say he didn't, but we had a lot of interaction with him and he seemed mostly to just not listen or pay attention. I work in a vet clinic, so he was a client, not a customer. I was helping him out to his car with some dog food. He does have 2 vehicles, but one is a big pickup and the other is a small car. 2 of the vehicles were cars and one was an SUV. I remember this because it was such a bizarre exchange. And the cars were nothing alike. I don't remember the exact models, but one was maroon and one was silver. He was notorious for being numb. No matter what we did or instituted after an appointment he had with us, he would always forget everything we had said and lose the paperwork we sent with him between our office and his house. His girlfriend would always call in a tizzy that we told him nothing of what was going on with the dogs or how to use the medications or whatever, and he liked to argue with the vets that whatever they diagnosed was wrong. They currently go to another local clinic after fighting with one of our vets, but will be back after fighting with the other one. They've been back and forth a few times. Oh, he also bought a puppy and wanted his ears cut. Now, we don't do that, so he went a couple of states away to have them done, but then didn't tape them up properly and now they're cut and floppy. The poor dog is sweet, but dumb, untrained, and looks stupid because of this stupid guy. Story 13. I knew this guy in high school who really thought his practical jokes were hilarious. He would just do stuff designed to piss you off, thinking your salty reaction would make it funny. Now, you may be thinking this guy's a dick, and you'd be right, but he's also incredibly stupid because every time someone said, dude, chill out with your bullshit, he just blew it off. Social stupidity, I guess. Well, one day he knocked this kid's hat off his head. These guys were friends, but clearly there was some hostility. Another kid picks up his hat and tells Pranker to f off. Pranker smacks his hat again. Another kid tells him if Pranker knocks his hat off a 3rd time, he'd knock Pranker's head off. Pranker has a eating grin, is completely oblivious to how dead-ass serious this guy was, and got absolutely clocked in the face when he with this guy's hat a 3rd time. All he could say was, "What the man, chill out," but no one was willing to hear him out. Story 14. The guy I worked with named Buddy bought a huge Snap-on rollaway toolbox for over $3,000 on credit. 2 days later, he sold it to a coworker for $1,500 because he had some overdue bills and had to pay them. Needless to say, he never paid Snap-on for the toolbox. He was off into the winds after he was fired for starting his 4th fist fight at work. One of the other guys I worked with told the Snap-on salesman where Buddy's new job was, and last we heard they are now garnishing his wages. Guy was a nutcase, though. He had very thin skin, and the slightest thing would set him off. He went absolutely nuts when he was set off, though. He yelled at the security guard and threatened to have him fired because he didn't like his tone. He almost got fired 3 times for fighting, but he was able to win the department manager over until the 4th time. Oh, and one time he was told to put caution tape across a malfunctioning gate, and he said, "I don't know how." Story 15. I work for a small retailer, and we had that guy for a while. He would call every day and ask the same questions, and no, not in different ways or something that can be construed as clever. This same person also couldn't figure out the key fob for his own car and had to have his 5-year-old daughter let him into his own car. He has kids, let that sink in for a second. He's incapable of basic math besides addition and subtraction. We buy stuff, and when we tell him he gets 30%, he doesn't understand what that means. He also asks every time how much he's getting, despite not understanding the answer. Also, I'm not sure he actually knows how to drive. We have a dumpster in our parking lot, and he manages to bump it every time with his car. Every time he leaves, we have to go move it because he hits it on the way in and out. Back to the fact that he's a father somehow, he's also an awful parent. We have witnessed him telling his kids they are worthless and terrible, stupid, dumb, and any number of insults that are more applicable to himself. Unfortunately, that's not something we can report to CPS. I have watched him, on more than one occasion, fail to open the door to the bathroom and simply walk into it face first. He once came in with a hamburger of some kind and while eating it, pulled a packet of mustard out of his pocket. He did not put this mustard on his hamburger. He instead bit into the packet and sucked the mustard out. I could keep going. One time, he left his daughter in the car and she locked herself out with the key inside. Instead of walking 2 buildings down to the car repair place, he took a rock and broke the driver's side window. Our store has both a publicly accessible webpage for making orders from home as well as in-store kiosks. Despite him owning a modern Android smartphone, one using it up to look food, he claims he doesn't have the internet to use our website from home. His wife, or girlfriend, I don't actually know, calls him just about every time he's in, and he lies to her every time saying he's on the way home and that he's stuck in traffic. As many of you might have guessed, he's not particularly well groomed, although he usually has something in his hair. What that something is, I'm not sure. That's all I've got. He recently moved further away, so we don't see him very often anymore. Story 16. This girl I went to school with thought Earth had 2 moons and adamantly argued with me and a teacher. The girl thought that there were 2 moons of the same size, one on each half of the Earth. She thought that the Earth didn't rotate while in orbit. She also thought that since the sun was so big and bright that it blocked the moon during the day. None of anything she said ever made sense, and she would not answer any further questions or follow up with any rebuttals. I didn't try to make her feel stupid. I don't like doing that to anyone for any reason, and once I saw how set she was on what she believed, I backed off, because I'm not one to force any views, beliefs, facts, or opinions on anyone else. And I never said that I don't give my opinion or view or that I don't present facts. I do. I will always say what I have to say, but after a certain period of time, when a conversation comes to a complete standstill and nothing is getting through to a person, I do choose to walk away, and I do so knowing that I tried my best and nothing I can do will be effective. Story 17. I had a guy in a 3rd-year undergrad developmental psych course raise his hand in a full lecture hall and ask the professor, "Prof, do infants diagnosed with SIDS get asthma later in life? Like, are they more likely to get asthma?" SIDS stands for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. He just kept pursuing the question. The prof didn't understand how she could answer it. She just thought there was some kind of logic in it that she wasn't seeing. Finally, some girl took the initiative to shout across the room, "No, they're not more likely to get asthma. They're dead. They have died suddenly and thus will not be at risk of developing asthma." Great day. He always sat in front of me and I would see him writing just absolutely horrible poetry and song lyrics. Story 18. My cousin. All through public high school, she was a snob who looked down on everyone. She was super stylish and struggled academically. We graduated in 2014. We both went to colleges, not the same one. She got a job at a bar and stayed out late drinking. Her boyfriend told her she didn't need to complete college, so she just stopped showing up. Didn't drop, just stopped showing up, completely flunked out. Now here comes the mega stupid part. Our families live hours away from her college at the time. Her family went to move her back home. My cousin's mom noticed a pile of clothes in the corner. The mom said, "What's that? Your laundry? Pack it and we'll wash it when we get home later." My cousin, and I kid you not, "You can wash those?" Turns out she'd been throwing away clothes instead of washing them. She claimed she didn't know she could, yet she washed her undergarments and bras without a hitch. She's now at home with her family and has started doing more chores to show an increase in responsibility. She still tries to throw clothes away, citing that she didn't know that they could be washed or reused. Makes me wonder what she thought all those years before college before she left home. She wore some of the same outfits repeatedly. She had to have known they could be washed. Story 19. A friend in college. She had lots of stupid moments, but the best story is probably the night she went home with a guy and was freaking out the next day that she might be pregnant. They had not had intercourse, he just fingered her, but for some reason she thought maybe he had sperm on his hands and therefore could have got some inside her. I never fully understood why she thought this. I vaguely remember her saying something about how he might have been jacking off before he touched her, but she didn't see. I don't know. So anyway, she is so anxious about this that she decides she needs the morning after pill and gets it. Then, because of the warnings about how ill it can make you, she concluded that she needed to tell her parents the whole tale. Honestly, can't remember her logic here. Why didn't she just wait to see if it even made her sick, or why being sick would be suspicious and would give her away? Which led to a lecture about promiscuity. The best part of it, she was studying to be, and now is employed as, a goddamn science teacher.
Professors. Who was the dumbest student you ever had and what was so dumb about them? I'm not a professor, but I was paired with another student during our fourth year of pharmacy school rotations. This student, whom we'll call M, displayed a surprising lack of knowledge. Our student room at the hospital, where 6 of us worked in assignments and projects, was decorated with a mix of meme posters for our preceptor and motivational posters. One poster featured whales breaching the ocean. M suddenly exclaimed one quiet afternoon that the poster was so incredibly silly. Why are whales at the top of the water? They don't breathe air. Curious, I asked him what he meant, and he insisted that whales were fish and therefore breathed water, not air. We tried to correct him by explaining that whales are mammals, like dolphins, but M disagreed, saying that anything that swims in the water is a fish. I decided to test his knowledge further by asking about penguins. He responded that penguins are just too foolish to realize they can fly, and that all birds fly. When I brought up ostriches as an example of flightless birds, he claimed they were just bird-like mammals. When I asked about bats, he confidently stated they were clearly birds. This went on for about 15 minutes until another student asked him how he passed basic biology and comparative anatomy, both of which are required for pharmacy school. M revealed that he took these classes online and paid his sister, who was in medical school, to complete the assignments and exams for him. This revelation explained a lot. M was known for asking very basic questions, such as what such medications are used for, even after lectures on allergy medications that covered the topic. Our entire class of about 200 future pharmacists was always puzzled by how he managed to get into our school. M was supposed to review patient charts with me for ICU rounds, but instead, he was busy shopping for a private plane he planned to buy after graduation. He intended to work in a state that needed pharmacists while living elsewhere and commuting by plane. Another time, M was removed from a subsequent rotation site for inappropriate behavior, involving a physician's car and engaging in activities not permitted in a hospital campus. This happened not once, but 3 times. The first 2 times, the physician was understanding, but the third time, M was banned from the hospital grounds and failed the rotation. M walked across the stage with us at graduation, but he didn't receive a diploma that day, partly due to the incident at his rotation site and his history of not following academic integrity guidelines during exams. There was some drama within our graduating class because we felt that if he wasn't graduating, he shouldn't walk with us, especially since we all knew what had happened at his rotation site and he had been reported multiple times for not adhering to academic standards. However, the university allowed him to walk, reasoning that he paid his tuition and his family was there to see him. About a week after graduation, M posted in our class Facebook group, asking if there was a way to sue the university or the federal government or loan holders to forgive his loan, as he had decided he no longer wanted to be a pharmacist and wanted to essentially return his education. Can't believe M's sister is in med school and she let him think whales are fish. Did she also tell him that the sky is green and the grass is blue? At this point, I'm convinced M's family tree is more of a family circle and education is just a loose suggestion in their household. I mean, who pays someone else to do their assignments and then brags about it? That's like paying someone to go to the gym for you and expecting to get buff. Story 2. I wasn't the professor, but I did speak with her about a particular student during an online class I was taking. Each week, we had to contribute to a discussion board, providing our thoughts on the given topic in our own words. Our responses were visible to everyone, aiming to foster discussion. I put effort into researching and carefully crafting my answers, and I always signed my name at the end, even though our names were already displayed. Without fail, an hour or two after I posted my contribution, a classmate would post hers. She would copy and paste what I had written and present it as her own answer. It was obvious she hadn't even read it, because she left my name at the end. After this happened, I sent an email to our professor to express my concern. She replied, confirming that she had already noticed the issue. The following week, that classmate was no longer listed in the class roster. I was always curious about why someone would pay a significant amount of money just to copy answers without making any effort to learn. This classmate wasn't young either. According to our profile pages, she was at least 20 years older than me. It was a strange and unwise choice. Story 3. I wouldn't describe it as dumb, but it was certainly baffling and annoying. This classmate had somehow made it all the way to college, still believing that an odd and overly exaggerated form of flirting would help her get what she wanted, even with female faculty. It was quite cringeworthy to witness. She would tilt her head to the side, play with her hair, swing her leg back and forth, and use a semi-childish way of speaking while glancing up through her eyelashes. It was clear that any conversation with her should only happen in front of others. She confided in me that she was reading and studying every night but still wasn't improving her test scores and asked for help. I explained how to create written study materials to better absorb information. She claimed she had done this and reviewed her materials regularly, yet still wasn't seeing any progress. Genuinely concerned and puzzled, I asked her to bring her study materials to the next class so we could go over them together and ensure they were accurate and helpful. She agreed. When the next class came, she announced, with even more exaggerated gestures, that after receiving her latest test score, which she got before our previous conversation, she had thrown her study materials away in a fit of frustration, and they were all gone, as if they had never existed. I looked her in the eye and said, "I think you should consider the role that self-discipline might be playing in your grades in my class." She reacted with a huff and a pout, and I never saw her again. What saddens me is that it was clear someone, most likely her family, had taught her that these behaviors were effective. No one sticks to a behavior so firmly unless they've had some success with it. Story 4. During college, I studied modern languages at university and met a girl who had managed to spend an entire year abroad, a compulsory part of the course, living in the country where her language was spoken, working at a job with local people, and sharing a flat with 3 local people. And after the year was up, her language skills had not improved, and her flatmates had to talk to her in English because she couldn't understand them otherwise. I mean, I fully appreciate that some people find it much harder than others to learn a foreign language. That's not actually the part I find dumb. The dumb part is getting into 30,000 pounds of debt and spending 4 years of her life in a degree, then putting absolutely zero effort into actually learning the thing you're paying to learn. Actually, to be that bad at the language after a full year, you'd have to make an active effort to avoid it. Never turn on a television or pick up a magazine. Spend all your time in English in Irish-themed pubs and ignore anyone who tried to talk to you. Maybe they were just socially awkward? I don't know, man. Story 5. I wasn't a professor, but I did date a girl who wasn't very bright. She was sweet and naive, but she was genuinely not smart. We played a joke on her, convincing her that cats couldn't see themselves or other cats in mirrors. Her cat was also quite oblivious and never seemed to look at itself in the mirror. So this became a running joke among my friends and me for a while. We'd been dating for over a year when we decided to take an astronomy class together. A few weeks into the semester, we broke up, and it was a pretty bad breakup. One day I was sitting at the back of the class and she was way up at the front. We were trying to keep as much distance between us as possible, maintaining a sort of truce for the sake of learning. The professor was discussing advanced telescopes, and being a cat lover, used her cat as an example to explain how one might use a reflecting telescope to see another cat in a spaceship or something similar. It was an introductory class, so she often used these playful examples. The class was mostly bored and lulled by the lecture, but then a small hand raised in the front row. I quickly realized what was about to happen and slid down in my seat. Cats can't see reflections, so your example won't work." A smug voice piped up from the front. The professor paused, unsure of what had just been said. At first, she was confused, then she wondered if it was some kind of prank. Once she understood that Max was serious, she made a snarky remark and continued with her lecture. Max spoke up again, not wanting to be dismissed, and the professor rolled her eyes halfway through her sentence and asked, "What are they, vampire cats?" The entire class of 200 students erupted in laughter. Max stood up, gave me a withering glare, and stormed out of the class. Story 6. I'm not a teacher, but there was an incident that made me feel sympathy for my philosophy professor in community college. My professor was a priest, a very patient and easygoing man, but one student really tested his patience. There was a woman who would sit in the front row and constantly fall asleep. When she wasn't asleep, she would argue with him about every major point he made. It was clear she was not very intelligent, and she did this so often that every time she spoke up, the whole class would collectively do the silent groan and eye roll. She was a mom and rode horses, which she brought up quite often. One memorable moment was when the professor was discussing fulfillment and motivation in jobs that pay well but have unpleasant duties. He was explaining that while anyone could tolerate an awful job for a while for good money, eventually the psychological toll would become too great, leading to a desire to quit. She loudly objected and said that if that were true, how could her horse do everything she wanted it to and be happy with just an apple? She literally told the professor he was wrong because her horses like apples. The professor was at a loss for words at this point. I think he had finally reached his limit. Everyone in class was just flabbergasted. I tried to explain the concept to her, but she just kept insisting it wasn't true because of her horse. Without a doubt, she was the worst classmate I've ever had the misfortune to share a class with. Every day was like that. Perhaps the professor thought a bit more about whether teaching was worth it after that day. Yeah, there are moments in life where you question why you're there. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 7. I'm not a professor, but I was a student in my human development class during the first day of college. As usual, the teacher used the first day to review the syllabus. He projected it onto the screen and gave each of us a copy to follow along, which was more than what most professors typically did. He went over the syllabus in quite a bit of detail to ensure we all understood what was expected in the class. Every person in the classroom understood what he was saying and how the syllabus worked, except for one lady. She was middle-aged, perhaps a bit older, and for some reason, she had a question about every aspect of the syllabus. Asking a question after every point the teacher made, she even asked questions after the teacher had just explained what she was asking about. He patiently answered her questions, but it was clear he was getting annoyed and suggested she ask any remaining questions at the end of the class. Everyone in the classroom was becoming frustrated with her. Eventually, one student spoke up and pointed out that she was wasting everyone's time by asking questions that the professor had already answered, or that were clearly stated in the syllabus. He suggested she read it carefully before asking any more questions. The lady seemed shocked and offended by this comment and looked at the teacher, as if expecting him to intervene. However, he simply shrugged and agreed with the student, saying, "He's right," before continuing the syllabus. After that, she stopped asking questions, and we never saw her again after the first day. Now, I don't like to assume people are unintelligent just because they might be confused about something or have something else going on. At the same time, it's puzzling how someone can keep asking questions that are clearly being explained to them, and then get offended when someone points this out. Story 8. I was one of the students in a graduate school seminar that included a student who struggled significantly with language and expression. We were all puzzled by how he had been admitted to the university, let alone the history program. The seminar was a mix of advanced undergraduate and graduate students, so not everyone was expected to perform at the same level. But this student's challenges were extreme. It turned out that he had been admitted to the university through a science or engineering program, in which he excelled. His math scores were exceptional, and he had even taken organic chemistry for fun multiple times. However, he didn't want to pursue a career in that field. His true passion was history, so he transferred to the humanities department. His outstanding science grades had overshadowed any concerns about his transfer. Unfortunately, he struggled immensely in the history program. He lacked the necessary vocabulary, syntax, critical thinking, analytical skills, and creativity to pass even an introductory history course, let alone a graduate-level seminar. The professor asked me to help him edit his paper before submission, and I kept a copy because it was so astonishingly incoherent. Everyone felt sorry for him because he was so eager to succeed in the program but lacked the necessary skills. The last I heard, he'd been transferred back to the science department, where he was thriving. I hope he found happiness and success wherever his academic journey took him. Story 9. Years ago, I worked at the Faculty of Pharmacy at a large Canadian university, where there was a student known for challenging every aspect of her academic experience. It was a running joke that the only way she wouldn't graduate would be if she failed to challenge her graduation requirements. She rarely did any work, never attended classes, and consistently failed every course. However, she would challenge her grades and was given numerous additional chances. For instance, students had to pass a calculations test that involved simple multiplication and division, but they needed to achieve a perfect score. If they didn't, they had to retake the test until they did. She scored 8 out of 10 and challenged the result, arguing that 8 out of 10 is a passing grade and she should be allowed to proceed. She claimed that expecting students to get a perfect score was unfair and unrealistic. The professor explained that if she made such a calculation error in a real-life medication scenario, it could be dangerous, highlighting the necessity for perfection in this context. She engaged in this pattern of behavior repeatedly. It seemed that filing all these challenges must have been more work than simply completing the coursework. To this day, I check the credentials on the walls of any pharmacy I visit to ensure that she isn't the one behind the counter. Story 10. As a graduate student, I taught an introductory astronomy lab course. One semester, I had a student who was not particularly bright. On the first homework assignment, which covered basic physics concepts, there was a question asking why an aircraft carrier floats. His answer was that its wings kept it from sinking. The student struggled throughout most of the semester. He attended class and completed his work, but he was so clearly lost that it was somewhat sad to see. Then, one day, after I had explained the structure of the galaxy to him countless times, he had a moment of sudden understanding. His eyes widened, and you could see the concept click in his mind. For the rest of the lab session, he was excitedly sharing with anyone who would listen just how vast the galaxy is. From that point on, he started coming to class early and staying after to ask questions. He ended up earning a B in the class and became one of my favorite students. One day, during a final exam, I noticed a student hiding paper under his exam. I could see the corner sticking out from where his exam was folded over the staple. I asked him what it was to ensure it wasn't a cheat sheet. He claimed it was scratch paper, and I told him to make sure it was turned in with his exam. He looked a bit disappointed. When he turned in his exam, I noticed that his scratch paper only had the problems written down, including the problem numbers and instructions. He had planned to transcribe the test questions, take them to the bathroom for his girlfriend to answer, and then copy the answers back onto his exam. Story 11. During my first semester as a teacher, I encountered a student who struggled with even the most basic tasks. As we were discussing the final paper, she raised her hand to ask a question. She wanted to know how to create the space that appears before a new paragraph. I was taken aback and asked for clarification. She described it as the chunk of space before a paragraph begins, leaving the class momentarily speechless. I then asked if she meant an indent, to which she excitedly confirmed, explaining that she had never figured it out and had been using zeros and white font to create the space. I couldn't help but laugh at her ingenious yet misguided solution. I took the opportunity to introduce her and the class to the tab key, which solved her formatting issue. Another memorable student was a young man who frequently interrupted my lectures as if we were having a casual conversation. His interjections were often grandiose claims about his abilities or completely unrelated to the topic at hand. For instance, while I was explaining the rhetorical triangle, attributing its origins to Aristotle, he would interject with comments about gyros or claim to be an expert in philosophy, despite failing the introductory course twice. I had to remind him multiple times each class to not talk over me and to save his questions for after the lecture. His behavior extended beyond mere interruptions. He also refused to participate in any in-class assignments or group projects, preferring to play on his phone instead. This student did not submit any work throughout the entire quarter. On one occasion, he handed me a piece of paper with 2 handwritten paragraphs, claiming it was the essay that was due 2 weeks prior. This was for a college-level class where the assignment required a typed 1,500-word minimum essay. He then proceeded to argue with me about the concept of due dates, both via email and after class, insisting that nothing in class should have a due date. Despite his disruptive behavior, lack of participation, and failure to submit any assignments, he had the audacity to complain to my department head, claiming that my class was unfair because it didn't accommodate his preference for turning in work whenever he felt like it, disregarding due dates entirely. Story 12. This introductory English prose fiction course was designed to ensure that students, many of whom were international, had a sufficient level of English to succeed. In the first 2 weeks, they had to complete a diagnostic assignment worth 2% of their grade. This assignment also helped me understand the students' prior experience and familiarity with literature, guiding the comparative references I could use in lectures. After class, Mike lingered and approached me. He expressed resentment at having to take the course, insisting I was too intelligent and accomplished for it. To prove his point, he offered to show me a manuscript of a poetry book he'd written about his recent breakup. This course had no connection to poetry, neither in studying nor writing it. Poetry writing wasn't a substitute for analyzing prose passages. I felt uncomfortable with the idea of reading his personal breakup poetry and politely declined. Mike never returned to class, and I assumed I wouldn't have to deal with him again. However, he remained enrolled and ended up with a 2/100 grade at the end of the term. I was surprised when, 3 days before the final exam, he emailed, demanding a medical exemption from the exam and all semester assignments. He wasn't just seeking to have the class not count against him, he wanted a passing grade despite his absence and lack of completed assignments. I refused his request. I appealed to my department chair, who also said no. He then went to the faculty dean, who also denied his request. Finally, he took it to the school-wide administration, who told him no and warned that further nuisance could lead to his removal. I wasn't kept in the loop after that, and my life was better for not having to worry about it.
When were you blown away by your own stupidity?
At school one day, my friend and I had a pen that lit up when you pressed it to paper, or if you flicked a switch on the pen, the lights would flash. He kept turning it on and waving it at me. This annoyed me, so I took the batteries out in front of him. He stared at me for a second before trying to get the batteries back. In the midst of the struggle, I decided the best way to stop him from getting them, so I popped them in my mouth and proceeded to swallow them. My friend returned to staring at me, but with a panicked look on his face. I didn't think anything of it at first, but eventually I realized that I shouldn't have done that. I started feeling weird. I held my hand up and asked my teacher if I could go to the nurse's office. Skeptical, she asked me why. I told her I had just eaten 3 small batteries and was feeling weird. She stared in disbelief, I think, for a second, then told the class that she'll return in a moment and immediately seized my hand and practically dragged me along, sprinting to the nurse's office. She threw me into the nurse's office and screamed, "He swallowed batteries!" The nurse jumped out of her chair. "Oh my God, I'll ring the NHS and find out what we need to do." I immediately felt like the stupidest idiot alive. I asked if I was going to be okay. My teacher looked at me and smiled the fakest smile I'd ever seen in my life. "Of course you are, boy." Long story short, I had to be taken to A&E and had to be x-rayed to see where the batteries were. I was given laxatives and a sieve and kept overnight, of which I spent 75% of this sifting through like some crazed Wild West miners scouring for gold. Eventually I found them and I've lived happily ever after since, thankfully. I wish I still had them, a trophy of the stupidest I've ever been. Well, at least he didn't hurt his friend. It could have been a battery crime. I am sorry. But I guess the only thing brighter than the pen was the hospital stay, right? Story 2. I live in a big city and used to own a car, have since sold it, and one night a friend was getting married pretty close to my apartment. There was a small pregame going on the other side of the city, so I drove down to meet up with everyone and was going to just drive back to my place with everyone in my car, park it back at my apartment, then we'd all just walk down to the ceremony together. We ended up running a bit late and there were more people than could fit into my car, so we just grabbed an Uber so we wouldn't have to wait for parking. I left my car by my friend's house in 2-hour parking, but that ended like 30 minutes after I parked and didn't apply on Sunday, which was the next day. Fast forward 2 weeks later, since I usually walk to work and never had to use my car, I usually needed a minute to remember where it was parked when I needed it. After looking for it for around 5 minutes, it finally hit me. Story 3. The first time my husband took me to a fancy restaurant. I grew up on the US-Mexico border, so I'm used to the word con being with in food, chili con carne, arroz con pollo, you get the drift. Husband takes me to a fancy restaurant when we're still dating, and I'm poor, so prior to this, for me, fancy was like Olive Garden. I pick something out for dinner and he says, "Do you want an appetizer?" I said, "I don't care, you pick one, I've got to run to the restroom." I come back and sit down and he says, "I ordered the duck confit pastry appetizer." I'm kind of horrified but don't say anything, but I'm expecting us to be handed a duck with the feet still there. So the appetizer comes and it's these little pastry cups with cubes of, I presume, duck, and I look at him and say, "So are the feet in there too?" "Yeah, it's duck confit, not duck confit." And I'm never living that down. Turning a date night into a lesson in French cuisine. Win-win in my book. Story 4. All right, friends, I know this story is hard to believe. This is why it's I am absolutely blown away by my own stupidity story. I was driving to my boyfriend's house and needed to add a touch of gas to the tank just to make sure I could get there and back. Also, I'm a poor college student in New York, very little driving, so I was only going to pay for a couple of gallons. I got my license as a sophomore in college, and this happened my senior year of college. I have pumped gas maybe a handful of times. I grabbed the green nozzle. Green means go, right? I was pretty distracted. My first clue that something was off was that the nozzle didn't fit right. Like it kind of went in, but I couldn't get it to stay, so I just stood there and held the nozzle up to the tank. Gas kept dripping out onto my hands. I got frustrated, so I stopped at about 2 gallons, paid, and left. I remember distinctly smelling the gas on my hands the whole drive there, about 15 minutes. I burst into my boyfriend's house and immediately went to the bathroom to wash my hands, which my BF was amused by. A few hours go by and I think nothing of it. After a while, I get this nagging feeling about the whole gas thing, so I decided to Google green nozzle gas and immediately saw that I major messed up. Since I had put such a little amount in, some sources suggested that I might be able to dilute the diesel if I filled up the gas tank and ran it down several times. My BF and I rushed out to the car to try this, but the car sputtered upon starting and went out. I was so embarrassed and flustered, we had to wait for his parents to get home. His dad, might I add, had the same reaction as many of you. "How in the hell did you manage that? There are specific barriers so that you can't put diesel in your car."
I suddenly realized why the gas spilled onto my hands. Anyway, then I had to call my dad to come pick me up. This also happened to be the first time my parents met my BF's parents, something I was hoping was going to be happening at our college graduation, but alas. My dad shows up with a cut-up garden hose nozzle and states, "I haven't done this since high school," and attempts to siphon out the diesel. It doesn't work. Apparently, newer cars have blocks in place so people can't steal gas. They also have blocks so that you can't put diesel in, but I got around that one, didn't I? The car had to be towed and the engine was flushed out or something. I paid my parents $700. I think I've regained some respect from my BS family, but they still tease me incessantly. I deserve it. And that's my story of how I managed the impossible, bewildering stupidity. Story 5. I wasn't necessarily blown away by it, but the one that sticks out most is believing the 9/11 official story was a lie. Now, to be fair, I was going off all the information I had and did some research, though I was always missing one critical piece. And though it may be true that standard passenger jet fuel does not melt steel beams, the piece of information I was missing was that it doesn't need to melt for that level of catastrophic failure. Probably about 2 years ago now, I finally stumbled upon a YouTube video that points out that one simple thing. Using a piece of construction-grade steel, the YouTuber heated it like 80% of the temperature needed for it to melt, and then bent it 90 degrees with just his pinky, which definitely means a building could pancake the steel beams that were heated enough to bend by the standard passenger jet fuel. It's pretty astonishing that lacking one simple piece of information can make such a massive difference to a conclusion. Before, I thought at bare minimum they were test jets using fuel that burns hotter, or even it was an inside job because I guess there was construction not long before, and a still unidentified white van parked just blocks away a few days before, but no, it was regular planes with regular fuel. No thermite or thermate either, just the official story. I'm also more surprised the American government didn't lie to me, lol. Story 6. Many years ago, I was dating a girl and we decided to grab some Taco Bell. At the time, and still to this day, I don't often eat there. I enjoy it, but I don't ever crave it, so I usually hit up a burger joint instead. So we pull through the drive-thru, she gives me her order, and I recite it and follow up with mine. Me? I'd like 6 crunchy tacos with mustard and cheese only, please. Extra fire sauce, if you will. X. Babe, this isn't... Me. Hold on, babe, give me a sec, let me finish this up. Sorry, ma'am, I just want 6 crunchy tacos, no lettuce, just meat, cheese, and mustard. X. Babe, listen to yourself, they don't have that stuff here. Me. What? They don't have tacos at Taco Bell? At this point, I was visually frustrated by both my ex's and the cashier's understanding that I just wanted my tacos, and I wanted them how I like them. Finally, the cashier decided to throw me a lifeline and tell me that I wasn't at McDonald's. It still went over my head and I tried to order it again. Until finally, as I muttered the word mustard for the 4th time, I began to gaze upon my own stupidity and shriveled into my own shame. The tacos were yummy and quite mustardless, as one would imagine. Story 7. Oh, let me tell you. So one time my boyfriend, now currently holding the title husband, and now we're swimming at the neighborhood pool. It's important to know that he is almost 6 feet tall, with extremely long limbs, and I am 5'3" short with stumpy, sad excuses for limbs. We were just goofing around and decided to do handstands to ultimately decide who the cooler adult was in this relationship. So I take a turn, my husband takes a turn, and in the end I ask him, "Man, how do you get your legs so much higher than mine? You're not that much taller than me." He then proceeds to stare at me with the most dumbfounded face and just lifts his arm straight up, waiting for the light bulb to click. Now every time I do something dumb, he looks at me and I yell, "Don't you dare," and he smirks, locks eye contact, and throws his arms straight up. I'll never live that one down. Story 8. This is pretty mild, but my workplace has membership cards onto which members can load money and use it to buy food and drinks. We refer to the money on the cards as points because they can earn points by participating in events, etc. Anyway, I just got into work and a guy came up to the till and handed me his credit card and said, "Before you pour my drink, just charge me for it to make sure I have enough on there." For some reason, I thought he meant that he wasn't sure he had enough points on his membership card and that he'd handed me the wrong card. So I said, "But this is a credit card." And he said, "Yep, just scan it. I think I have enough there." And again, I was like, "Sir, this isn't a membership card, so I can't see how many points you have." He was understandably annoyed at how thick I was, so he took his card, went to the other side of the bar, and asked one of my coworkers to do the same thing. She did, and it turned out he didn't have enough money anyway, but it took a few good seconds before I realized how dumb I was. What made it worse was that this exchange happened in front of 2 other coworkers who watched me make a schmuck out of myself and didn't say anything. Story 9. One night my partner was slow cooking a stew, so just left it to simmer while watching TV. I was on the other side of the house playing some video games and just chilling. After a half hour, my partner comes in and says, "Can you smell gas?" Walking out into the hallway, I realized I could too. We went over to the gas stove and saw that somehow the flame on the stove had gone out some time ago, and the stove was filling the house with gas. We freaked out a bit thinking, how do we deal with this, worrying about our pets? In my brilliance, I thought the best option would be to just restart the flame and let it burn off. I reached out and just about started to click the ignition when my partner pulled me away to stop the house from blowing up. Not my finest moment, and I am yet to live it down. Ha ha. Story 10. Not me, but my daughter was blown away by hers. 12 years old, had decided at about 7 or 8, for reasons only known to her, that she hated cheese. Wouldn't touch or eat anything with cheese in it or on it. And we're having dinner one night at the Cheesecake factory. We used to try to go there a couple of times a year. It was a family tradition that each of us got our own slice of cheesecake for dessert. It was expensive, but eliminated any bickering about sharing. We have a son 5 years younger than her, and we could easily stretch those huge pieces into dessert for a few nights after, so we always justified it. This had been a tradition for 4 or 5 years. Daughter orders her favorite New York cheesecake with the raspberry sauce drizzle. She's eaten about half her slice, and I remember her hatred for all things cheese. Me. "See, you do like cheese." She looks at me, total deer in headlights. "Oh, what do you mean, cheese? This is cake." I said, "Yes, princess, cheesecake." She's now in near panic mode, grabs the apron of a waitress walking by. "Excuse me, but what's this made of?" "The cheesecake," says the waitress. Daughter is now about in tears, as are my wife and I, although for completely different reasons. "I thought this was just cake." Waitress confirms to her that yes, indeed, cream cheese is the main ingredient. We still make fun of her about it 9 years later. Story 11. I woke up on the morning of December the 25th, went about my usual Saturday of not doing much, playing on the Xbox, reading forums, that sort of thing. Come lunchtime, I look in the fridge for food and notice a lack of drinks, an unacceptable situation that had to be resolved before an evening of gaming and watching a film or two. I pop on my winter gear, jump on the motorbike, and head off to the shops. It's cold and a light dust of snow is on the road, so I enjoy sliding around like a hooligan at very low speeds, and as a bonus, the roads are really quiet. I get within sight of the supermarket and the car park is empty. I thought this was rather odd, but assumed they'd had a power cut or something, so I headed off to another supermarket. Halfway there, I thought, the roads aren't just quiet, there's not a soul to be seen. Zombie apocalypse? Evacuation I missed? This is very odd. Where the chuff is everyone? My brain woke up. It's Christmas Day, you idiot. Thankfully, a petrol station and convenience store was open and drinks were purchased and Christmas Day was saved. Next year, he should maybe set up a reminder. If the roads are empty and the supermarkets are closed, it's not just any other Saturday. Story 12. My sister and I, we forget words. It's a regular occurrence. It used to blow us away. Now it's normal. Sometimes we put together words that at least mean something similar. Sometimes we don't. The first time it happened was about a year or two ago when my sister thought the couch was called a fridge. She was telling the family about some story involving the couch and just called it a fridge the whole time. The cat's on the cushion oven. That's a couch. There should be a pizza in the anti-microwave. That's a freezer, and whether it's a pizza or not is up for debate. And whether there should be or definitely isn't is also another debate. I'm going to use the body dishwasher. That's a shower, though it's also sometimes a laundry machine. I need to get a new hot air gun. You probably thought this one easy, but it could really mean anything from a blow dryer to a car depending on the context, or maybe a hot glue gun. The list goes on, but really any word means any word if you're good at charades, pointing and having equally stupid teammates. People will come over and they're like, "I could have sworn you said we were going to go downstairs and play Monopoly." No, we're going the other way and watching the screen. Story 13. While I was doing my apprentice time as a mechanic, I hooked up with a girl. 2 days before exams, I took her to watch Jackie Chan's Rush Hour in the drive-in cinema. I got some snacks from the concessions booth and a tray to carry them. The cool show-off I was just threw the tray out of the car, littering the premise to not waste time in making out. Next day, I could not find my wallet. My ID was in there, my license, and a depressingly small amount of cash. But with my exam coming up the next day, I needed to have my ID and provide it when asked. I looked for it everywhere, drove around, peeked into trash bins, called the girl, and ripped apart my mom's car interior. The wallet kept missing. Exams came up. I was uber anxious because of the missing ID. I almost lost my mind and barely passed. I used to be in the 90 points range, now I was around 50 points, which was just enough to pass. Nobody asked for ID. A few days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox, no postage stamp, so obviously someone just drove by and dropped it there. It was my wallet and a note saying, "Dear Mr. XXX, it seems you accidentally lost your wallet while visiting our cinema. Have a nice day." I had tossed my wallet, which I had on the tray, along with the tray and the trash while littering. Story 14. When I was a teenager, my family owned 2 cars, a soccer mom van and an old Toyota. I was over at a friend's place who lives across town and asked my dad to pick me up, which he did. As we were pulling into the driveway, I asked my dad, "Where's the car?" As I could only see the van in the driveway. My dad looks at me and says, we're in it?" Another time, I forgot the word bunny and rabbit. My parents have a rabbit that is not kept in a cage. He's trained to use the cat's litter box, so he just hops around the house. My brothers also have a paper route. One afternoon, I was helping to sort papers for the route, and the rabbit started chewing on some of the papers. I tried to tell my brother, but all that came out was, "The hoppy cat is eating the papers." Now my brothers tease me nonstop about that. The critters in their house aren't a dog, and a bird and cat and a bunny anymore. It's a barky cat and a flappy cat and a hoppy cat. Story 15. When I first went to college, my sisters would call me all the time. As I was talking to one, I was tearing my room apart trying to find something. "I can't find it, sis. I just can't find it." "Find what?" "My damn phone." There was silence on the other end, which was soon filled with laughter and giggles. I was now lifting my mattress up with one hand, convinced my phone had somehow slipped underneath. "It's not funny, damn it. Maybe I left it in one of the classrooms." "Say, Amy, what's in your right hand?" "My mattress, because I'm trying to see if my phone fell underneath it." "Uh-huh, so what's in your left hand?" "My phone." As I answered, it clicked, and I actually pulled the phone from my head to confirm. I could hear my sister laughing loudly on the other end, so I hung up. So I'm about to graduate, and she will not let me live it down, though rightly deserved, I suppose. Story 16. When I saw the post, I tried to remember all the stupid things I've done, and it blew me away. Most of them were in the comments. But now I remembered, during an eclipse back in the 2000s, and despite the warnings not to stare at the sun without protection, I did it. I used a black glass in front of the left eye and no protection for the right. About a year later, I realized I had myopia in my right eye, minus 0.75 or something like that. I didn't realize it back then. A couple of years back, I did it again, this time with binoculars. The second I aligned the binoculars with the bright light, not the sun itself, just the light around it, I felt a slight burning sensation and looked immediately away. I thought to myself, why is this so hot? And tested the same thing with the paper instead of my eyes. As you would expect, it immediately burnt a hole in the paper. Last year, I got an eye exam. I have a -1 left and a -1.95 right. Do not look directly at the sun. I may have been extremely lucky by not getting blind, so keep your luck for the lottery. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. 2 very different examples. Do y'all know that clip from years back where Ben Shapiro is trying to debunk climate change and winds up making the case that if the sea levels rise and people's houses start flooding, those people can just sell their flooded homes and move? A friend showed me that. She was just about whizzing herself with laughter, and I just stare at it like, what's the problem? She had to explain it to me. I've never felt that dumb. Much worse, I had 2 grand aunts who had Alzheimer's. Now in the spring, one of them passed, and good for her, honestly. She was still quite coherent and then just fell ill and passed away in a week. Very good passing altogether. I live halfway across the country, so I didn't even get to see her in the hospital. She passed away the day I was coming. I stayed for the funeral. Summer comes, I move to live with my parents while I work my summer job, and I basically have no idea what is happening outside it because work itself is quite stressful. The grand aunt and her husband have their 60-year anniversary or something, and it's really, really sweet. Autumn comes by, I move back to where I'm studying, and at some point I realize I have no idea whether it was 1 grand aunt that passed away or 2. Can't ask anyone, obviously. Worry about this for like a week before it comes back to me. Now I have issues with my mental health and those can cause forgetfulness, but geez, that's quite extreme, right? Story 18. I had to put marking tapes to these certain devices and I was bummed out that the marking tape would certainly melt with the rubber part I was going to attach it to. You know how some tapes plus rubber turns into a gooey mess? I went to great lengths to find high-quality marking tapes and bought IPA to clean possible goo, etc. I went on for a couple of months, marking the devices and carefully cleaning the tape or residue and goo which had started to form already on some units. Quite laborious job, such a simple thing. A week ago, I was tired and had to mark one device. I had a random piece of tape on my hand and was like, I'm too tired to make this look nice. I'll just slap it on this hard plastic part right next to the rubber part. Needless to say, there would have not been goo problems with the hard plastic part, and it was a better place to slap the marking tape in every possible way. I felt like quitting my job on the spot because of my low brain capacity. Oh, did I mention that I did this with a coworker? I called him over to see this new mind-blowing discovery that I just made. He just looked at it and mumbled, "Oh, for God's sake," and laughed a bit with a desperation in his voice. He had been marking the rubber parts too. Story 19. I needed to update a PowerPoint based on new information. I was sent the PowerPoint and the updates. When I opened them, I was having a hard time telling what needed to be updated. I sent it back and said, "These look the same. Did someone already put in the updates?" This led to several back and forth emails where I was told on what slides had the new info, and I would screenshot and send back proof that the new PowerPoint was already updated to show the same information. Finally, my manager came to my office and just said, "What, have you had your coffee yet today?" And as I was showing her on my screen that it was already updated, I realized that I had opened the same old PowerPoint twice. This is by far the biggest brain fart I've ever had in my life. Story 20. Breaking up with my wonderful, kind, sweet, caring boyfriend to pursue a relationship with a former flame, who turned out to be nothing like he was when we were originally together. I left the most supportive relationship I'd ever been in because my ex had convinced me with pretty words that it would be worth it. It's not. I ended up basically mistreated, never out of malice or anger, more out of, I'm bored and the only way I can entertain myself is by harming you, and wouldn't stop even when I asked him to, and told without words that playing his video games was more important than spending time with me by, say, taking a walk. Hell, we'd finish having intimacy and he'd immediately pick up the controller and go back to COD or whatever. I was told that I'd never be allowed to have the animals I want later in life, pigs, goats, and chickens, because he didn't want to waste money on them or take care of them. I was also told that gardening, which is essentially my career and biggest passion, was a waste of time and he'd let me have a garden, but I'd be on my own taking care of it. The man I left for him, he knew I wanted those animals and was excited to eventually take care of them with me. He even wanted us to have cows too, and he was so excited to help me with the technical parts of gardening, i.e. irrigation and plotting the garden out since I'm big picture and he's little details, and he knew how important plants are to me. He never harmed me out of boredom. Hell, he'd be the one dragging me out on walks and we were almost always doing something, and we'd treat ourselves by playing video games together every once in a while. We'd finish having intimacy and just hold each other talking or watching a movie or something. All because my former flame somehow magically convinced me that I'd be better off with him. Well, he was nowhere near the person he'd been when we were originally together, and I got to find that out only after giving up the most amazing relationship I'd ever been in. I will never stop kicking myself for that one. Story 21. On a business trip, the VP of our business segment was there. He took us out each night to fancy places on the company dime. Final night, he takes us to a run-down dive bar. It was midweek off-season, so it was pretty quiet. They specialize in oysters. Well, me being adventurous decided to order them raw, with nothing on it. Well, I ate one, somehow kept my face calm and quietly excused myself and made it to the bathroom before getting that snot ball out of me. Ugh. Cleaned up, came back, and the cook bartender were all laughing. I took it like a champ. Cook grabbed them and grilled them quickly, then gave us a lesson on how to properly eat an oyster, saltine, hot sauce, and all. Those I could at least keep down. The VP bought me some bourbon, praised my bravery, and brought it up every time we were in the same meeting. Story 22. During my first week of college, I was shopping for textbooks and eating lunch with my sister on campus. While we were walking through the main street for restaurants and shops, I spotted a homeless man across the street and muttered out loud, "I wonder how you got here." My sister turns around and basically says, "Huh?" So I then proceed to muse out loud, "The homeless man. I wonder how he got here. This is a college campus in the cornfields. How did he get here? Maybe he took a bus?" My sister immediately starts laughing and asking if I'm serious. I was completely serious. I don't know why, but at that moment of time, it did not even cross my mind that homelessness exists everywhere. And for some stupid reason, I thought that homeless people only lived in large cities. I'm still so embarrassed to this day about it. Story 23. I started working full-time at a standing desk that isn't adjustable, so getting the height perfect wasn't easy. Eventually, I cut a piece of plywood to fit the desktop, and that raised it to the perfect amount, so my hands on my keyboard were the perfect height while standing. That left the chair, though, which was still too low when I sat, meaning my hands were awkwardly high up on the keyboard. I checked, and it wouldn't adjust any higher. I measured the height at its maximum extension, and I think it was like 34 inches. Right about then, my new boss told me to come up with a list of any equipment I needed, so I was trying to figure out if I should put a multi-$100 chair on that list. It was tough to find anything taller than my existing chair. I tried various search terms like 37-inch office chair and super tall office chair. There was like one model and I had no way of knowing if it would be comfortable. It was just online. I put off turning in that equipment list because I wasn't sure if I'd look like a high-maintenance worker asking for a special chair that nobody else in the office had. I considered trying to modify the chair, but it rolled, so I couldn't put something under the wheels unless I wanted to lock them in place. A little platform would be a disaster. Not only would I have to kick it out of the way whenever I wanted to stand, but I could easily become the first office incident when I keeled off that thing on top of my chair. One day I was talking with a guy at a nearby desk about the problem and he said, "Why don't you put a cushion on the chair?" Story 24. Definitely the dumbest thing that ever happened to me. It was tornado season and a bad one was coming my way. I'd never taken shelter in this house before, so I just grabbed my phone and my dog and got in the closet. I'm on the phone with my mom and I closed the door because the tornado was passing through. At that point, I realized two terrible things. One, my phone has 3% left. Two, this house is old and the doorknob doesn't twist to open the door on the inside. I lost my mind calling both my parents. My mom says she'll come get me out. My dad says I should try to break the door. That doesn't work, but my mom is coming to my rescue. She has a key, but I unfortunately have extra bolts on the inside, so she had to break the window to get me out. I felt so dumb trying to explain it to my landlord the next day. Luckily, my dad was able to replace the glass for cheap. Story 25. Lived in an apartment some years ago. Guy was walking a ferret outside. Cute, so I had approached to ask to pet it. He picked it up and he was saying his pet's claws were getting too long. Me, ever the nurturer, said we had a clipper for our dog we could use. Somehow he began telling me about his girlfriend trying to recover from substances. Should have been my first red flag. Nope. I let him come in, and he held the pet, and I clipped the claws. He saw our nautical decor and we talked about fishing, boats, etc. Stupid me showed him our cool nautical bedroom. Back to the living room talking about how he had a friend with a boat, blah blah blah, and more about his messed up girlfriend. Also made friends with our dog. Our dog saw that all was cool with me and the guy was chill. SO was not at home at the time. Forward a few days later, SO and I ran to store. Dog was home, so we left sliding door open, which faced in back by pool, screen locked. Come home and front door unlocked. My partner, kind of a butch gal and very protective of me if needed, goes in. Screen slid open. She immediately goes to the bedroom. All spare change, a lot, gone. $2,000 pearl necklace from her grandma, gone. Expensive car tools kept under bed, gone. Money I had encountered, an awesome heavy silver bracelet she had given me, gone. The bastard was a con man using a cute pet casing our place as we chatted. I felt and still do after 7 years, her grandma necklace I didn't even know she had. I never let another stranger in again. Story 26. I was playing Minecraft and I had a very tall and complicated redstone system that was a 16 by 16 and went around 100 blocks up. This had multiple different parts. And I decided to go to work on the last part, which I have worked on for about 20 plus hours on, so I go to build up and scaffolding was not a thing at the time. So I messed up my buttons and built up one block with a redstone block, breaking my entire circuit. So I'm like, oh well, might as well keep going up, so I did, and as I do, I break another circuit, so I'm like, if I break one more, I'm just going to stop. So I keep going, passing a few, touch one, and it looks fine, which I later learn is not, and I keep going up, breaking around 12 of my 23 circuits. And I get to the top and break a block to get through the roof, but there is a pool on the roof, so water comes down, breaking 5 more circuits. This was a super cool skyscraper I built with a ton of redstone in it. I was about 3/4 of the way done with it, and so much of it broke, so I said, who cares, and blew it all up. But then the world got corrupted as I updated it and created a new world, so I guess no harm done. Story 27. I'm not sure if these fit, but whatever. These are like 3 different scenarios. Rate them from dumb to dumbest. Number 1, as a kid, I hated afternoon naps because of the light flooding my room. One day, when I was 2 and put to bed, I got so bored and took off one of my earrings and chucked it on the bed. Scared my mom would find out I ate the other one. Nope, I swallowed the damn thing whole. When my mom came to wake me up, she asked where my earrings were. I told her, and I quote baby me, I ate it in my tummy. We went to the ER and sure enough, one was there. She never asked about the other one, so I guess I didn't get in trouble. Number 2, this happened when I was 7. I should have known better. My family and I went to this botanical garden museum thingy. We went to the cactus exhibit. The exhibition wasn't fenced off or had any glass around it, just cacti. My mother got down on one and told me not to touch them. My father thought she didn't need to tell me. Later on, I was looking and saw one that looked fuzzy. Side note, there are cacti that when you touch them, it will pierce your skin but not stick to you. Others do both. Most kids would poke it. I full-on hugged the cactus and started to scream in pain. The cactus I touched was one of the cacti that sticks to your skin. It took my mom 4 hours to remove all of the spikes, plus she had to deal with a toddler screaming at her. It was only my hands that were covered, not anything else. Number 3, now this one took over the course of 3 years. When I was 2, 3, and 4. This shows I didn't learn anything. I'm a pretty stupid person everywhere, but academically, so I'm Indian and we have a festival called Diwali, which means the Festival of Lights. Every year on Diwali, we do sparklers. My mom told me not to touch them because they will burn me. My dad told her I wouldn't, and she shouldn't have told me that. If you read the last one, you know how smart I am and what I do. Guess what I did? I touched it, and it burned me. Yay. Did I learn a lesson when I was 2? No, I did the same thing when I was 3. My mom asked me why, and I said, I thought it wouldn't burn me this year. I still didn't learn, and when I was 4, they didn't bother me anymore. When I was 5, I stopped doing it. I knew the drill. Go inside and put ice on it. Or get toothpaste and put it on the burn. Toothpaste, by the way, works. Funny thing is, my parents know how stupid I am, so they don't bother that much when I'm hurt because I know what to do. I have a brother who is 2 years older than me, and when I was 5, he burned himself. My parents were all over him, asking if he was okay and if he wanted something, blah, 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 blah. Story 28. As a quote-unquote highly intelligent person, this one hurts. I was in the oil field at the time when this occurred. We were working on the lowest level, the plus 10, adequately named because it's 10 feet above the water, of an oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. All of us were thirsty and needed some refreshment, so I volunteered to hike up multiple levels above us and acquire our multitude of choices. AKA, I grabbed a cooler with a lid and put various drinks and ice into it. Well, lo and behold, I had an ingenious idea. Being 220 or so feet and multiple stairwells down, wouldn't it be easier to tie a rope through the handles and lower it down to them? Yes, it would, I deemed. I cut my rope and hastily tied it to the cooler. How much energy and non-breaking work I just bypassed. I called down and get their attention, acknowledged. I grab the cooler and perch it on the handrail and steady it. Next, I grab my rope and make sure it is taut and ready for lowering my mad scientist scheme. Ready? Yes, I am, I tell myself. The cooler is gently nudged off the rail as I keep my rope in hand. Slowly, I see hydration ebbing closer to my coworkers. And then, well, it ended up in the Gulf of Mexico. Breathe. Why? Because I tied the rope to the lid and not the handles. The lid, people. And to add salt to my wound, the next morning we had a safety meeting teaching us how to tie a rope to a Coleman cooler. Thanks, Dad. Yep, my dad was the supervisor leading the meeting. Story 29. The day I stole my own car comes to mind. So my friends had come by my work and asked me to join them at the Starbucks across the street when I got off. I drove over and parked in the only spot left, out of sight of my friends. We hung out for a while, then all jumped into another friend's car to do something else. Later that evening, my friend was dropping me off at work to get my car, and I freaked out when it wasn't there. We called all the towing companies thinking it had been towed, but no one had it. Our next thought was that it had been stolen since it was a junk car and couldn't be locked. So I filed a stolen vehicle report with the cops. Next day, I got a ride to work, and again, my friends came by to tell me to come over to the Starbucks when I got off. As I walk over after work, I see them all standing around and whispering. I ask what's up, and they say they found my car and saw some teens standing by it before going for frozen yogurt and how it was weird. It finally clicks in my dumb brain and I start laughing. I explained it to them and they had the exact reaction you'd expect. But then I had to call the cops and explain it to them. That went, well, hilariously. One was not impressed and the other was laughing hard. They told me to wait a few hours for the report to clear the system, otherwise I would be pulled over and arrested. Story 30. This happened last night. Coming home from work around 8:15 p.m., take my coat off, put my keys on the table, and remember that I have to get power from my flat before the shop closes, 9 p.m. Power is obtained through little plastic sticks that you give to the shop, and the shop puts however much money you pay for, which is then fed into the meter to power your home. Simple but annoying to manage when you forget and your shower turns off, forcing you to use the emergency 5 pounds just so you can rinse the soap out of your everywhere. It already used the 5 pounds, so I had to get to the shop within the hour so I could use the electricity. No sooner do I walk into my home, my parents call, and anyone who's flown the coop knows parents like to call whenever they can. Maybe it's been a week or two because you've been busy or whatever. I've got time to spend before the shop shuts. So one lengthy conversation with them later, I notice my phone buzzing in my ear and see it's my girlfriend calling. Cutting my parents off mid-convo, I apologize and hang up. Called GF again and she's only ringing to remind me to get power for the flat. She works late. I told her I was about to leave. Bye. Looking at the clock, I see I have 15 minutes to get to the shop. No biggie, I've made it in less time, just a quick drive there and back and the chore would be done in 5 minutes. So I put my coat back on, grabbed the plastic stick and put it in my pocket, walk out the door and close the door. Now is a great time to mention my door has a lock, meaning I now need my keys to get back in. Just then I remember they were still on the table and the door is shut. My car keys were inside too. I pull my phone out and see I have about 12 minutes before the shop shuts. My deluded, panicking self thinks I can make it in time without my car and with no way back inside. So in my heavy coat and work boots, I break into a sprint, out the building, across the gardens, into the main road and up the street. Worth noting that this shop was on the other side of the village I live in, the complete other side, and about as far as you can go while still being in the village. The village was silent, no cars, no pedestrians, no noise whatsoever. The silence only broken by a dull, quiet thud, thud, thud growing ever louder. Cue a dark figure in heavy clothes and darting across a roundabout, panting like a maniac and looking like he's in a moderate amount of pain. It's not long before I stop to reinsert my lungs back into my body, then, panic setting in again, I begin running only to stop much sooner. Several stop-starts later, I arrive at the shop. I breathe a sigh of relief, seeing the neon signs. Raising my arms above my head, I see metal shutters. It was closed. It had been for a while. Pulling out my phone, I saw the time, 9:12 p.m. Defeated, I walk the very short, convenient distance across the road to the local factory. I walk up to the gatehouse, opening the door and stepping inside the bright fluorescent light. My girlfriend lifts her head up from her desk and sees me, dripping with sweat, red as a beet, and panting like a dog. "What the hell happened to you?" breathlessly explains. "You stupid, how the hell did you think you could make that? You can get power from the co-op." The co-op was about a third of the distance. I didn't know that. Well, now you do. Here are my keys. Enjoy the walk back home, silly. At least I know how fit I am now. I'm not. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.